Ever wonder what it's like to freeze your soul off in a world with no electricity, no heating, and no TikTok to complain on? Welcome to medieval Europe, where the winters didn't just chill your bones, they shattered them. Picture this. You wake up in a mud hut that smells like wet goat wrapped in straw, next to 6 coughing family members and maybe a chicken. Your breath fogs in front of your face, inside the house. The water jug is frozen, your fingers are purple, and the only thing on the breakfast menu is regret. This isn't just cold. This is cold that judges you, cold that kills you, cold that laughs when you try to start a fire with damp twigs and wishful thinking. So, before you whine about how your room is 18 degrees Celsius and your hoodie's still in the wash, ask yourself, could you survive the deadliest winters in history with nothing but wooden shoes and boiled cabbage? Slam that subscribe button like it owes you firewood, and ring the bell like you're trying to wake the sun itself. This is Midnight Empire, the only place where bedtime stories come with frostbite, famine, and a historically accurate punch to the face. Kill the lights. Wrap yourself in something wool, because tonight we're time traveling into a frozen hellscape so brutal it makes Game of Thrones look like spring break. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. I need to know which poor soul I'm mentally freezing tonight. Tonight we crack open the frostbitten lid of medieval winter. Not the kind you sip cocoa through while binging Netflix in a heated apartment, but the real bone-snapping kind. You know the one. The air bites back, the water barrel's a solid block, and you're pretty sure your toes have become theoretical. Imagine waking up on a dirt floor, wrapped in a damp wool sheet that smells like goat, with a ceiling made of sticks and a cold breeze politely reminding you that insulation hasn't been invented yet. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, your breath is visible, your fingers are numb, and the first sound you hear isn't bird song or church bells. It's your father cursing at the frost on the chamber pot. Welcome to January. You're a medieval peasant, and surviving the winter isn't a cozy Hallmark montage. It's a full-time, underpaid, frostbitten occupation. The hearth fire burned out hours ago, and no one had the guts to get up and restart it. Your family huddled together like barn cats, limbs tangled, body heat barely enough to keep you from dying in your sleep. You slept in the same shirt you worked in yesterday, and your wool blanket has holes in it that rats use as front doors. Now comes the morning routine. Rolling out of your hay and rag mattress, smacking the ice off your tunic, and trying to see if your toes still obey commands. Spoiler, 2 of them are staging a quiet rebellion. Outside, snow lies in dirty heaps. It's not picturesque, it's oppressive. Wet, heavy, mocking. The thatch roof above you drips, one slow leak at a time, landing directly onto the cooking pot you set out for this exact reason. Rain, snow, sleet, it all finds its way in. Your house is basically very committed colander, and you haven't even had breakfast yet. Your mother grunts as she scrapes together a meal. Leftover barley mash mixed with cabbage, heated until lukewarm over a fire fueled by yesterday's dung. It smells like fermented sadness, but it's warm, and that's currency now. You sit in silence, spooning the mush into your mouth. Across from you, your little brother sneezes directly into his bowl. No one flinches. Germs haven't been invented yet, or at least not discovered. You stare at the frost creeping up the walls like ghostly vines. Last night, you swear you heard a rat freeze mid-squeak. Now it's a tiny fir popsicle near the hearth. Mainstream historians agree winter mortality rates in medieval villages were brutally high. Between illness, hunger, exposure, and structural collapses, some villages lost a quarter of their population before the thaw. Quirky fact? Some families used to sleep with livestock, not just for warmth, but because they believed chickens absorbed nightmares. Imagine cuddling a rooster just so your dreams didn't scream. And yet, here you are. Breathing, sort of. Your job now is to brave the cold, fetch water from the frozen stream, maybe chop wood if you can find any, and help clear snow from the barn door so the cow can moo at you in judgment. The cow, of course, is the warmest thing on the farm. Sometimes you contemplate switching places. Every breath is a tiny battle. Your snot freezes, your fingers go stiff, your eyelids feel heavy, but no one asks, "How are you?" The answer is obvious. Cold, hungry, alive, barely. Historians still argue whether peasant resilience was due to natural toughness, sheer necessity, or a complete lack of alternatives. But it's clear the people who survived these winters weren't just tough, they were frostbitten legends. Because there's no plan B here. No Uber Eats, no heated blankets, no social media break. You just put one frost-cracked foot in front of the other every single day until the sun finally remembers you exist. So, you button your tunic, grab your wood axe, and step out into the white void, knowing full well it's going to be a very, very long winter. The snow crunches beneath your boots like stale bread crust. Every step sends cold shooting up your legs, but you trudge on. Because winter, in your world, is not something you survive by waiting. It's something you fight with routine, grit, and blind, frost-bitten stubbornness. Your first task is wood. Your family's firewood pile, which was pitiful even in November, is now a single splinter and a prayer. Trees aren't exactly abundant near the village anymore. Everyone's been chopping them down since your great-grandfather discovered fire and the thrilling warmth of not dying at night. The closest source now is the haunted grove. Okay, it's not officially haunted, but old Herta swears she saw a demon squirrel there once, and honestly, you believe her. You take the axe and head toward the grove, your breath clouding in front of you like your soul trying to escape. The trees loom, skeletal and creaking. Snow muffles every sound but your heartbeat. Somewhere, a raven cackles. Classic horror movie stuff. You pick the least ominous-looking tree and swing. The axe thuds, wood chips fly. Your fingers go numb, your nose starts to drip, and your ears ache like they're about to fall off and join a snowman band. But you keep chopping. Quirky fact? Some villagers used to sing to the trees before cutting them down. Part pagan ritual, part psychological coping. You try humming a tune. It sounds like despair, but rhythmically. By midday, you've managed to gather enough firewood to not die tonight. That's the goal. Not thrive, not flourish, just delay the dying. You haul the bundle home, passing neighbors whose faces are red and wind-burned, eyes squinting against the flurries. Everyone's moving with the same glazed-over stare. The peasant shuffle, winter edition. A child drags a bucket of snow to melt for water. An old man coughs so hard you wince. Nobody talks much. Talking wastes heat. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had a concept of hope as we understand it. Was it spiritual? Was it simply momentum? Or was it the daily miracle of surviving just long enough to complain about it? You dump the wood by the hearth. Your mother gives you a rare nod of approval. High praise in these parts. Now it's on to the second most vital resource, food. Winter pantries in medieval homes are less well-stocked larders, and more whatever didn't rot or get stolen by rats. Your family has some dried beans, turnips, a few hard loaves of bread that double as defensive weapons, and, treasure of treasures, a small sack of smoked meat. It's probably squirrel, possibly pigeon. There's a beak. You don't ask questions. Dinner prep is simple. Soak, boil, pray. Your mother adds a pinch of something green. Could be herbs, could be moss. No one knows anymore. But the smell is comforting, and the steam feels like a spa treatment for your frozen nostrils. You gather around the pot like it's a sacred altar. Everyone gets a bowl. Everyone savors every drop, even the beak. One small, sweet moment. Your sister offers you her last chunk of bread because she saw you limping from the grove. You trade her your portion of mystery meat. This is peasant romance at its finest, a courtship of sacrifice, silence, and cold fingers. Night falls early, as if the sun gave up on trying. Candles are precious, so you sit in half darkness, wrapped in every piece of cloth you own. Your father tells a story, something about a winter so bad that chickens froze mid-step and had to be thawed in soup. You're not sure if it's a joke or dinner inspiration. Outside, wolves howl. Inside, your baby brother farts in his sleep and everyone pretends not to notice. You lie down close to the hearth, not because it's warm, it isn't anymore, but because it's where the heat once was, and that's better than nothing. A final thought tickles the edge of your mind before you drift. You made it another day. Another 24 hours of cold, hunger, and near despair. But you're still breathing, and in this world, that counts as winning. You wake to the sound of coughing, not the dainty, polite kind, the heavy, chest-rattling, phlegm as an entity kind. Your father, of course. He's leaning over the hearth, hacking up what sounds like half a lung while poking the dying embers with a stick that's somehow more lively than he is. You groan, not just from the noise, but from the cold. Every joint in your body feels like it's been individually cursed by a frost demon. Your toes, missing in action, possibly frozen off in the night. Time will tell. Welcome to the medieval peasant's morning routine. Hypothermia with a side of chronic illness. Your breath fogs the air as you sit up. Your sister is still wrapped in a burlap cocoon, her nose peeking out like a baby mouse. The baby is somewhere beneath a pile of furs, snoring softly. You hope. Now begins the sacred rite of winter dressing. You put on every single layer you own. Shirt, tunic, another tunic, pair of breeches that used to belong to your uncle until he caught fire that one time, 2 pairs of socks, one with holes, and boots that are more patch than leather. Still cold, but now you look like a fashionable haystack. You step outside and are immediately slapped in the face by the wind. It smells like smoke, frozen dung, and despair. You inhale deeply. Home. The village looks the same as always, gray, brittle, and slightly tilted. Roofs sag under the weight of snow, icicles dangle like tiny frozen knives. The well is mostly frozen, so a queue has already formed. Everyone with their best, I'm trying not to cry from the cold, face on. Mainstream historical fact: most medieval villages relied on communal wells or nearby streams for water, which meant winter was both a logistical and bacterial nightmare. Boiling became essential. when you had wood. Otherwise, you drank and prayed. You join the line, holding your pail like it's filled with gold. Behind you, old Herda mutters about the frost spirits. Again. Ahead of you, someone sneezes into their hands and then touches the bucket handle. Excellent. Plague Simulator Level 10. Back home, your mother is dealing with another problem. The roof is leaking. Not water. Ice. Sharp, steady drops of melt that are now forming a small, dangerous stalactite over the soup pot. You fetch the chamber pot, don't ask, and strategically place it beneath the leak. Welcome to medieval plumbing. Every solution is a bucket and a prayer. You'd think snow might help. You know, melt it down, make water, ice cream if you're insane. But snow in your village is about as clean as your father's cough. Soot, ash, animal droppings. It's more like semi-frozen misery paste. Still, you pack some into a pot and set it by the hearth, hoping for melt. That's when you hear it. The dreaded sound of the barn door creaking. Your livestock. In theory, your animals are protected in a small rickety structure next to the house. In practice, one good sneeze from a goat could collapse the entire thing. You rush out, boots crunching on frozen mud. Inside the barn, the air is thick with animal breath and regret. The cow is shivering. The chickens are motionless, either sleeping or plotting revolt. The pig looks at you with eyes that say, "You better not." You toss in what little feed you have left. Old hay, turnip peels, and something that might have been bred 2 seasons ago. The animals accept it like royalty, forced to dine on table scraps. Still, they eat, and that's the point. Quirky fringe tidbit. Some medieval farmers used to knit tiny wool sweaters for prized animals during harsh winters. You consider this while staring at your pig. Then you remember you barely have clothes yourself. Sorry, pig. Back inside, you help patch the roof using an old shirt and some wax. It won't last, but it keeps the ceiling from actively stabbing you in your sleep. Progress. By noon, the sun peeks out for 3 glorious minutes. People actually stand still to bask in it. You do too, face up, eyes closed, pretending, just for a second, that it's spring. Historians still argue whether these micro moments of warmth affected morale significantly. Some say it was enough to stave off depression. Others argue the contrast just made things worse. All you know is that tiny bit of sun felt like a divine pat on the back. Then it disappears behind clouds like a cruel joke. And it's back to work. Afternoon means repairs. The cartwheel is cracked. The fence is caved under snow. The chimney's blocked with soot. You rotate through tasks like a miserable carousel, hands numb, mind wandering. At one point, you catch yourself smiling. Not because anything's pleasant, but because the baby laughed at a chicken slipping on ice. And in that ridiculous moment, it almost felt like living, not just surviving. As night falls again, you eat the same stew. You sit by the same hearth. Your father coughs, your sister snores. You feel the heat on your cheeks, not warm enough, but present. One more day, one more victory. And somehow, in this cold, aching world, that's enough. By now, your fingers don't even flinch when they touch frozen iron. They just accept the numbness like a fact of life, like gravity or the ever-present smell of cabbage. Speaking of which, today's breakfast, cabbage stew again, with a side of hardened bread that could probably double as a murder weapon. You chew slowly, not because it's delicious, but because it takes effort to soften the bread with body heat alone. It's a tooth-to-tooth battle, and your molars are losing. Outside, winter is no longer pretty. It's oppressive. The snow has stopped falling, but the wind now howls like an angry banshee looking for snacks. Doors creak, trees groan. Your neighbor's chicken coop collapses in the distance with a soft thud. You assume the hens inside will now be sharing your kitchen. Today's task? Firewood. Not go chop some logs firewood. That would be too easy. Your wood pile ran out 2 days ago. Today, you're on scavenger duty, walking the forest edge for dead branches, animal droppings, yes, really, and anything remotely flammable that won't curse your family. You trudge past the edge of the village, boots crunching like brittle bones under snow. The woods look like a haunted cathedral, bare limbs reaching skyward, icicles catching the faint light like stained glass. You're technically not supposed to be out here alone. But technically, you also weren't supposed to eat the priest's emergency cheese rations last week. So here we are. Mainstream historical fact: peasant families burned a mix of firewood, peat, dried animal dung, and crop stubble for heat, often collecting it daily from forests or open lands, which could be illegal depending on local lords. In many places, stealing wood from noble forests was punishable by fines, beatings, or worse. You spot a fallen branch. It's long, damp, and stubborn, but it's yours now. You wedge it free, tie it with the others, and continue. Every now and then, you find something odd. A child's mitten frozen into the ground, a bent iron spoon, a tooth. You don't ask questions. Winter reveals things best left covered. By the time you return, your bundle looks like the skeletal remains of a Christmas tree. Your arms ache, your cheeks are numb, and your breath sounds like you're trying to blow out a torch with a lung infection. Your mother accepts the firewood like you've returned from war. She pats your shoulder. That's her version of a parade. While she stokes the hearth, you strip off your outer layers and sit near the warmth like a lizard absorbing light. The wood crackles. Sparks jump. For 5 precious minutes, you feel almost human. Then your brother sneezes directly into the soup pot. Lovely. You try not to scream as your father mutters something about godly punishment, and your mother just keeps stirring. Germs? Not a medieval concern. But food waste? Blasphemy. That stew's still going on the table. After lunch, which somehow tastes more like sneeze than broth, you head out again. This time with a shovel. The latrine is full. Yes, that latrine. The one behind the stable, half covered in snow, surrounded by flies that somehow haven't frozen. It's a pit of nightmares, and it's your job to empty it, or at least flatten it. You sigh, you dig, you gag, you question the concept of nobility. Fringe historical tidbit? Some medieval peasants believed placing rosemary sprigs near latrines could keep the demons away. You would prefer a nose plug, but superstition has its charm. As you work, a rooster screams somewhere in the distance. A bad omen? Or just a rooster being dramatic? Hard to say. Later that evening, the village gathers near the communal bonfire. It's the winter solstice, a moment of shared hope and grim celebration. Someone sings an old ballad. Someone else slips on ice mid-verse and eats dirt. You chuckle. So does the priest. Even God allows a little slapstick, apparently. Children run between legs, giggling, their breath forming tiny dragons in the air. You sip weak ale from a tin cup and feel it warm your throat. Not enough to feel tipsy, just enough to remember you're alive. Historians still argue whether winter festivals served as effective morale boosters or simply distractions from despair. Some say they bonded communities. Others believe they were band-aids on a severed limb. You don't know the answer, but tonight, you're glad to hear laughter again. Back home, you crawl into bed, a straw-stuffed sack that smells like goat and mildew. You wrap yourself in every layer you own and tuck your toes beneath your sister's feet. Mutual thawing, a sacred ritual. The wind outside hisses like a disapproving ant. But inside, the fire still crackles, the baby still breathes, and the stew, miraculously, hasn't killed anyone yet. That's a win. Your eyes close slowly. Tomorrow, the ice will come back. So will the hunger, but so too will you. Because somehow, against all reason, peasants like you keep waking up, keep hauling wood, keep laughing at dumb roosters and singing around muddy fires. It's not pretty, it's not poetic, but it's survival. And in a winter like this, that's a miracle all on its own. You wake up coughing, again. The cold has settled into your lungs like an unwanted tenant. Every breath sounds like a creaky door, but at least your limbs still work. Sort of. You flex your fingers, wrapped in rough wool, and stare at the smoke-stained rafters above. A spider has spun a masterpiece overnight, glistening with frost. You admire it for a moment before your little sister sneezes and wipes her nose on your sleeve. Good morning. Today is wash day. Well, what passes for wash day? The bucket outside is frozen solid, the river's edges are sharp as glass, and the communal bathhouse, if your village is lucky enough to have one, is locked due to an incident involving a goose, a candle, and some very bad decisions. So, you head for the stream with a wooden pail and a chunk of soap that's more rock than lather. Your breath fogs the air and bursts as you chip through the ice. Eventually, you punch through. Water gushes upward, spraying your face with liquid frostbite. You curse under your breath and feel momentarily guilty. The priest says God hears everything. You silently apologize. Washing clothes in winter is a mix of brute strength and strategic pacing. You dunk, scrub, slap, and rinse. Your fingers burn, then go numb. You wonder if your fingernails will ever forgive you. They won't. Historical fact: in colder months, laundry was often postponed entirely unless absolutely necessary. Some peasants simply beat clothes in snowbanks, using the cold itself to clean them. Actual washing with water was reserved for the desperate or the devout. You, unfortunately, are both. After a full hour, your hands are red and raw, and your garments are cleanish. The wind is picking up. You wring out the linens, haul them back, and drape them over a rope inside the house, where they'll probably stay damp for 3 days. Next up, food. The stew pot is empty, the bread is harder than guilt, and your mother is muttering something about turnip water. You eye the root cellar and pray for a miracle. You descend into the cellar slowly, torch in hand, as if you're entering a dragon's lair. The air down here is thick with cold and the faint aroma of onions, earth, and regret. Bins of shriveled apples, limp carrots, and a single suspicious potato await. You grab what you can. Every calorie counts. Modern minds romanticize peasant food, hearty soups, crusty loaves, humble abundance. In reality, it's a game of leftovers and edible guesswork. One wrong sniff, and you're 3 days into the worst stomachache of your life. Or worse. Fringe historical tidbit: some peasants buried cheese wrapped in animal bladders to ferment it through the winter. This cheese, when properly aged, was considered a delicacy by some and a war crime by others. You're not that brave, you stick to the root soup. While the pot simmers, you prepare for the afternoon chore, patching the roof. Again, a storm tore off another corner last night. You climb the ladder with a bundle of reeds, a hammer, and the grace of someone who's slipped off a roof 3 times before. You patch what you can. You curse when your foot plunges through a soft spot. You patch that too. From up here, the village looks like a cluster of warts on a pale, snow-blanketed frog. Smoke curls from chimneys. Someone's chasing a pig through the mud. A child is licking an icicle off a horse cart. You sigh. Back inside, your mother hands you a bowl. It's warm, salty, and vaguely brown. You don't ask, you just eat. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were constantly starving or just creatively hungry. Some records suggest famine was seasonal, but survivable. Others claim it was an ongoing low-level crisis, like having a wolf outside your door at all times, just occasionally closer. You tend to agree with the wolf theory. Night falls quickly. Your father returns with news. Wolves, actual ones, were seen near the forest's edge. You grab your slingshot, not because it'll help, but because it's comforting to feel armed. You check the chicken coop, still intact, mostly. Inside, the fire is weak but alive. The family gathers around it like moths. Your sister pokes a beetle with a stick. Your mother hums a lullaby that sounds like it's about 7 deaths and a mildly hopeful ending. Your father carves a spoon slowly with the same focus he gave to your birth. You lean back and close your eyes. The wind whistles like it knows secrets. You tighten the blankets. You try not to think about tomorrow, because tomorrow is market day, and that means waking up before dawn. To barter moldy bread for cracked eggs with a merchant who smells like horse feet and betrayal. But you'll go, because that's what survival is. Going, walking, gathering, trading, cooking, patching, not because you're heroic, but because no one else is going to do it for you. You live, not out of grandeur, but out of grit. And tomorrow, you'll live again. You wake in the dead dark, your blanket clinging to your back with the damp loyalty of an old dog. The hearth fire is nothing but cold ash now, and your breath blooms into the blackness like a startled ghost. You don't want it to move. But market day waits for no one, not even for a half-frozen peasant with a mild case of trench foot. The trick is layering. You slip on your wool tunic, then your second tunic, then a ragged cloak stitched from the former underparts of a goat. You look like a depressed scarecrow, but you're warmish. That's all that matters. Outside, the frost crunches like crushed glass underfoot. Your boots are stuffed with straw and prayers. Your sister, still small enough to escape the full weight of responsibility, waves goodbye from under a heap of furs. She's clutching a doll made from twine and pigeon feathers. You trudge down the rutted track toward the market square. It's less a square and more a patch of trampled mud where people exchange things that barely qualify as goods. A jar of pickled eggs here, a spool of thread there. You're hoping to trade a wheel of extremely suspicious cheese for some dried apples and, if you're lucky, a scrap of beeswax. Market life is winter's lottery. Some days you get sugar root or a half-useful tool. Other days, it's just arguments, bad smells, and frostbite disguised as a handshake. Mainstream fact. In medieval Europe, local markets were critical survival centers. Most peasants didn't use currency often. Instead, bartering ruled the day. And winter markets, fewer traders, higher desperation. You could trade a ratty scarf for a meal, or lose a sheep over a rumor about salt. You scan the stalls. The butcher's table is an icy slab of bone and ambition. The apothecary sells pine resin and what might be powdered owl. You make your way to the tanner. He smells like vengeance, but he's got a half bar of black soap that could stretch your supply for another month. You haggle, hard. He wants your cheese and 2 buttons. You offer 1 button and a sharp glare. Eventually, you settle on the cheese and a story about the fox you definitely didn't catch last week. He laughs. You laugh. You both know it's a lie. It's how business works. You find the egg seller next. She's ancient. Like, saw the plague and kept walking ancient. Her cart holds 3 duck eggs and a goose that stares at you like it remembers your face from a past life. You offer a threadbare scarf. She considers, nods. The goose hisses. You hiss back. Victory. By midday, your fingers are stiff, your nose is numb, and you've somehow acquired a handful of wilted greens, 1 cracked candle, and a rumor. The Lord's taxes are going up again. Of course they are. Apparently, heating his second hunting lodge costs more than expected. He wants every household to contribute an extra sack of goodwill, which is code for actual sacks. Fringe tidbit? In some regions, taxes were paid in kind. Grain, eggs, livestock, or even labor. If you couldn't pay in goods, you might end up spending weeks hauling stones for a bridge no one would use. Or worse, digging ditches in frozen soil while being yelled at by a man whose greatest achievement was inheriting his chin. You return home just as the sun tips behind the hills. The house is loud with voices and smoke again. Your mother is stirring stew with a pine branch. Your father is fixing a broken latch with more optimism than skill. And then, a knock. You freeze. Visitors in winter are like omens. Rare, mysterious, often inconvenient. It's your uncle. Of course. He smells like he lost a fight with a brewery and a pigsty at the same time. He's here to help, which usually means he eats all your turnips and tells stories that scar the children. He's also brought news. A wandering friar came through town last week. Said there's a comet coming. Bad omen. Worse than rats, worse than frostbite, worse than singing off key in church. Everyone should prepare. You ask, how? He shrugs. More turnips? Historians still debate whether medieval villagers truly believed in comet curses or whether it was just a convenient way to explain bad winters and worse luck. Some say these beliefs created mass hysteria. Others argue they were pragmatic ways of preparing for scarcity. Either way, your uncle is now eating the last of your soup and discussing how the comet will probably kill off all the chickens first. You stoke the fire. You eye the soup pot. You resist the urge to throw him in it. Night falls fast. Outside, a wolf howls. Your sister hides under a blanket. Your mother lights the single remaining candle and sets it near the hearth like a talisman. Your father hums an old soldier's tune. You patch another hole in your cloak by moonlight. The candle flickers. The stew bubbles. The fire cracks like old bones. You survive another day. Barely. But that's winter. Not conquering, not thriving, just enduring. You lie down beside your siblings, wrapped in threadbare warmth and the collective exhaustion of everyone you love. The roof creaks overhead. Your breath drifts into the rafters. Somewhere in the dark, the comet burns. You'll worry about that tomorrow. Tonight you're alive. And in winter, that's everything. The next morning, you wake to the sound of silence. Not peaceful silence, ominous silence. The kind of quiet that makes your spine tighten before your eyes even open. You sit up slowly. No wind, no birds, not even the distant scream of that rooster who thinks he's a falcon. Just a stillness that wraps around the village like a warning. Outside, the world has disappeared. Snow, not a dusting, not a light frost. No. This is the kind of snowfall that turns your entire landscape into a white canvas of, "You're not going anywhere today, peasant." Your house looks buried from the bottom up. Only the roof pokes out like a hat on a sleeping giant. Inside, your breath fogs the air as you walk. You rub your hands together for warmth, and the motion sounds like paper being crumpled. Your fingers ache. Your bones ache. Even your hope aches. This is what they call deep winter, and it has one goal: to see who's faking it. You check the pantry. Not great. One onion, half a sack of shriveled parsnips, a jar of something pickled you're afraid to open. The fire is burning low, and the wood pile's looking anorexic. Your father sighs and begins breaking down an old stool. Congratulations. You're now burning furniture to stay alive. Again. Mainstream historical fact. During brutal winters, peasants often resorted to burning anything combustible. Furniture, tools, even wooden parts of their own homes. Some villages stripped barns beam by beam, hoping they'd survive long enough to rebuild come spring. You take a turn outside to shovel snow from the doorway. The snow is waist deep and still falling like the sky is shedding its regrets. You catch a glimpse of the neighbor's cottage. A small hand waves from behind frost-glazed glass. You wave back. That's Anna. She's 8, loves honeycomb. Her family didn't preserve enough meat this year. You think about them often. You get to work cutting a narrow path to the road, or what used to be the road. The snow is so thick it's hard to tell where land ends and sky begins. When you come back inside, your fingers are blue around the edges. Your sister wraps them in rags warmed near the hearth. She doesn't say anything, but her hands linger. You realize she's never known a warm winter. You realize you haven't either. Lunch is turnip soup. Again. If you can even call it that. 2 slices of turnip floating in hot water with the faintest whisper of seasoning. But it's hot. And in winter, that's a luxury. Your uncle, yes, he's still here, is cutting up his own boots. Claims boiled leather makes a chewy but satisfying broth. You don't want to know how he knows that. Fringe tidbit? Boiled leather was actually consumed in times of famine. During the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, peasants and townsfolk alike resorted to eating leather belts, shoes, and even the bindings of old books. Anything organic became potential food. You spend the afternoon fixing gaps in the wall with animal dung and straw. It smells like regret, but it seals out the drafts. At night, the family huddles close under the blankets. You sleep in a pile, like puppies, with your parents on one end, your sister curled near your ribs, and your uncle somewhere snoring with a disturbing rhythm. Your dreams are strange. You see summer, grass, bread that doesn't crack your teeth, a bath, then ice, endless, sweeping blue-white fields. You're alone, barefoot, walking toward a fire that always stays just out of reach. You wake, sweating. It's still dark. You creep to the window. The snow glows faintly under moonlight. The wind has picked up again. A low howl curls through the trees like a warning from the forest itself. Historians still argue whether peasant winter routines were more driven by survival instinct or inherited tradition. Some claim ancient folk rituals, lighting candles at specific windows, burying feathers under doorsteps, were superstitious nonsense. Others believe they served as psychological shields against the oppressive, soul-crushing monotony of winter isolation. You believe in both. Your mother is muttering over the fire now, mixing dried herbs into a pouch she'll later hang above the door for protection, for warmth, for luck. No one questions it. Not anymore. Later, you learn the widow down the path didn't make it through the night, frozen in her chair, eyes open. They say she died peacefully. But you know peace isn't what winter brings. Your sister asks, "Why does winter take people?" You answer, without looking up, "Because it can." She nods, accepts that. Children here grow up fast. The next day, your father announces you'll be taking turns watching for chimney smoke at the widow's cottage. If it doesn't come back, her home might be raided. You can't let that happen. Even in winter, even when you're starving and frozen and half mad from the quiet, there are rules. You protect the dead. You bring her small things, twigs for her hearth, herbs for her table, prayers for her journey. It doesn't make the cold go away, but it keeps you human. And that's enough, for now. You wake up to the sound of water dripping, a strange, soft percussion tapping against the windowsill. You blink, unsure if it's a dream, until your sister squeals from under the blankets. "The snow's melting." You scramble out from the sleeping pile, your joints aching like old wood, and push open the warped wooden shutter. She's right. Outside, the world hasn't turned green, not yet. But the death grip of winter has eased. The white crust on the thatched rooftops is breaking, trickling in muddy rivulets down the sides of cottages. Smoke snakes from more chimneys than usual. Life is stirring again. But don't celebrate too soon. This is the deceptive thaw, the false spring, the medieval version of your ex texting, "I miss you." Just a cruel, brief illusion before another cold slap. You still ration your food. The fire still eats faster than you can feed it. And your uncle's cough now echoes in the rafters like a slow drumbeat of doom. But still, hope. The days stretch by a minute longer. The chickens cluck a bit louder, and one day, the goats start giving milk again. You nearly cry into your bowl of oats. Mainstream fact? In many medieval regions, animals stopped producing during the deepest winter due to starvation, cold, and lack of daylight. The return of milk from goats or cows signaled the start of survival, even before any crop could grow. You help your mother empty the chamber pots. It's a grim job, especially when it involves hacking through ice, but someone's got to dump the contents far enough from the well. The snowbanks have turned into layers of slush and old secrets, charred bones, rusted tools, half-buried shoes from God knows when. That afternoon, while collecting firewood near the edge of the forest, you find something strange. Footprints. Not yours, not from any villager either. Too narrow, too many toes. You squint into the trees. Nothing moves. You keep walking, but faster. Your cousin tells you that in winters past, starving peasants used to go feral, lose their minds and vanish into the woods, only to return different. She says her aunt once saw a man chewing bark with teeth like a dog's. You laugh. Kind of. Fringe tidbit. There are scattered accounts from medieval chronicles of people developing severe vitamin deficiencies, psychosis, and even delusions due to malnutrition during winter, sometimes being mistaken for witches, wild men, or forest spirits when found again. That night, your family gathers around the fire, which, for once, doesn't look like it's auditioning for its own funeral. The room is warmer. You even let your bare toes peek out of the blanket pile. Then your father tells a story. Not a sermon, not a warning. A real story about when he was a boy and saw a bear outside the village. He says the bear looked sad. You ask how he knew. He says it looked like it had nowhere to go. You nod. You know that look. Historians still argue whether storytelling during winter was just a way to pass time or an essential part of medieval survival. Some suggest oral tradition preserved knowledge, morale, and cultural identity. Others say it simply helped keep people sane when everything else was cold, dead, or crumbling. You listen as your sister makes up her own story about a snow queen who steals people's socks, but only the left ones. She giggles so hard she hiccups. Even your uncle smiles, between coughs. The next morning, you wake to bird song. Birds! You forgot how much you missed that noise. It sounds like life pressing its face against your window and asking, "You still alive in there?" You check the stores again. 2 onions now, a bit of salt pork, a loaf of bread that doesn't shatter when dropped. Still poor, still cold, still worn down, but not broken. You hear hammering in the distance. Someone's fixing their roof. Someone survived. You and your father walk out to the pasture. He points to a patch of ground where the snow's retreated enough to see earth. Damp, frozen, but earth, it's time. Time to start preparing for spring planting. Time to reattach the plow to the ox, sharpen the sickles, and dig through the seed stores to see what's usable and what the mice got to first. You look up at the sky, gray-blue, but not angry. Your sister runs out behind you, laughing, slipping in the slush, hands waving in the air like the cold can't catch her anymore. And for the first time in months, you smile without hesitation. You survived the worst, the hungry nights, the bone-deep silence, the frost that tried to unmake you. And now, as the world begins to thaw, you do something strange. You hope. Your breath still fogs the air, but the iciness no longer bites. Instead, it lingers like a memory, one you're not quite ready to forget. Survival doesn't mean safety yet. You know this. Everyone does. But for the first time in what feels like years, you're allowed to feel anticipation. The village buzzes with cautious energy. People are moving again, slowly, like marionettes with rusted strings. Tools come out of storage. Carts are patched. Even the village drunk is walking straighter, though that might just be from dehydration. You start your day by helping to scrape the moss off the side of the cottage. It smells like wet parchment and stubborn rot, but underneath is good wood. Strong, just tired, kind of like you. You're tasked with gathering early greens, not the lush produce of summer, but the bitter survivors of frost. Nettles, wild garlic, chickweed. Your grandmother once called them witch's salad. But now, they're hope on a stalk. Mainstream historical fact. Many medieval communities relied on foraged spring greens after winter. Nettles and wild herbs were rich in vitamin C, helping stave off scurvy after months of salted meats and bread. You collect them barefoot. The sun teases the soil, warming it just enough to not freeze your toes off, but not enough to trust it. You spot your friend Marla near the brook, squatting awkwardly over something shiny. She's scraping melted snow into a bowl, whispering to it like it's soup. She says if she catches the first thaw water and drinks it while thinking of a boy's name, she'll marry him. You say nothing. You're too focused on not stepping in mud. She asks if you believe in spring magic. You think of how close you came to not making it, and you say, maybe. Back home, your mother is kneading bread again, real bread, not oat flour mush shaped like despair. The smell drifts through the house, wrapping around you like an invisible hug you didn't know you missed. It smells like life. It smells like return. There's still barely enough grain. She's using leftover beer yeast and baking it over a reused flat stone. But it rises, and that's enough to feel like you're rising too. Fringe tidbit. In some villages, it was believed that bread wouldn't rise properly until the curse of winter lifted. Superstitions claim that spirits of the cold clung to baking tools and had to be woken by banging pots before the first true loaf. You eat slowly. No one rushes anymore. Every crumb is sacred. Every bite is a quiet celebration. That night, during supper, the village elder announces a plan. They'll hold a gathering next week. Not a feast. No one has enough for that. But a night of stories, warmth, and shared songs. A reminder that you're still here, that you're not alone. Historians still argue whether post-winter festivals were rooted in pagan rituals or simply practical morale-building exercises. Some see them as remnants of ancient sun worship, others as desperate attempts to rebuild shattered social ties after the isolating months of winter. You don't care. You just wanted to hear someone sing again. You wake early the next morning to help your father dig out the path to the fields. The earth is still too hard to plant, but clearing the land is step one. The frostbitten grass cracks beneath your boots, revealing black soil beneath. You dig. Not just the ground, but your place in it. A rhythm returns to your days. Chores in the morning, scavenging in the afternoon, soup if you're lucky, and huddled stories by firelight as the night creeps back in. But it's a softer night now. One that yawns, not snarls. You find yourself humming an old song. No one taught it to you. It just surfaced, like it was buried in your bones and now wants to stretch. You remember winter like a fever, a sickness that you dreamed through. But now, you're awake. And tomorrow, you'll plant something. The thaw has fully taken root now. Soft mud replaces the crunch of ice, and the scent of soil hits your nostrils like a resurrection. Spring isn't gentle. It doesn't tiptoe in with grace. It crashes into your world like a drunk uncle at a wedding, muddy boots and all. Everything is dripping. Your roof, your boots, your nose. The trees weep with melting snow, and puddles form deceptive mirrors on the ground, reflecting gray skies and dead leaves. But you see life sneaking in through the corners. Your first real task of the season? Turning the fields. You and a few other villagers gather at the edge of the frost-lifted land. Each of you grips a wooden hoe or a dull iron spade, tools as old as your grandmother's, passed down like bad jokes and worse debts. You start breaking the earth. It fights back, stubborn, dense, waterlogged. You think of it as revenge. The land slept while you nearly died. Now you dig into it with spite and survival in equal parts. Mainstream historical fact. Most medieval peasants practiced open-field agriculture where communal lands were divided into strips. Spring tilling was backbreaking and slow, especially after a hard winter that compacted soil and killed early crops. Your arms ache within minutes, but there's something satisfying about the rhythm. Dig, lift, turn. You sweat under layers still too heavy for the warming air. Steam rises from your shoulders like you're brewing vengeance. As you work, an old man named Hauk begins singing. It's half hymn, half groan, and everyone groans louder. But you join in, because even a bad song feels like defiance. Later, you sit beside the fire with a blistered palm and a bowl of bean stew. Someone added wild mustard leaves. It's bitter and pungent, but it makes your nose run in a good way. A luxury. Fringe tidbit. In some regions, villagers believed that adding bitter herbs to spring meals helped purge winter spirits from the body. One particular superstition claimed that eating wild mustard would prevent nosebleeds and heartbreak, not necessarily in that order. A boy named Elric, who once licked an icicle and got stuck to a fence, claims he saw a frog today. Everyone gasps. Frogs mean spring. Frogs mean the gods are laughing again. The next day, you wake to church bells, or what passes for them in your village, a rusted iron pan being smacked against a post. A messenger has arrived. He brings a word from the nearby market town. Salt prices are down, grain shipments are moving again, and a traveling tinker says he has news from the coast. Markets mean trade. Trade means movement. Movement means you're not stuck anymore. Historians still debate whether rural peasants actually participated in broader trade or if market interaction was limited to the elites. Some argue that access to traveling merchants gave peasants more mobility than previously believed. Others point to manorial obligations that effectively tethered them to their fields. You ask if the messenger saw any cloth sellers. He nods, mentions a red bolt the color of dying embers. You clutch your patched, colorless shawl. Maybe, just maybe, this year you'll own something that doesn't look like it was salvaged from a burial mound. The week ends with rain. Not a polite drizzle, a full-blown sky tantrum. You and your neighbors scramble to cover the seed sacks with tarps made from stretched hide. Mud becomes an ocean, but nobody curses the water. Rain now means life, food, a chance. Your sister, who nearly didn't survive the fever, makes mud dolls again. You tease her, but the truth is you're comforted by it. Her laughter returns like birdsong. One night, lightning splits a tree near the field. The village gathers the next morning and declares it a good omen, or a bad one. Depends on which elder you ask. They argue for 3 hours, then eat soup together anyway. You watch a woman teach her daughter to plant onions. Carefully, tenderly, like she's placing prayers into the dirt. You catch yourself smiling. You remember that just weeks ago, you weren't sure the sky would ever be blue again. Now, it's not just blue, it's wide open. The days stretch longer now, spilling golden light into the corners of your world like some divine apology for the months of darkness. Birds return with audacity, chirping over your sleep, arguing in the trees, flinging twigs like decorators in a frenzy. You don't mind. It's the kind of chaos that smells like promise. By late spring, the village transforms. Doors that once creaked open only for firewood now swing wide to welcome neighbors. Children scream with the reckless joy of not freezing to death. Chickens parade through courtyards like they own the place. And you're planting beans. Again. You've done it 100 times before, but this time feels different. There's less desperation, fewer prayers whispered between the rows. Your fingers still bleed from the soil, but the wind doesn't bite as hard. Mainstream historical fact: peasants depended on crop rotation systems and careful timing to ensure food for the next winter. Beans and legumes were often planted in spring to replenish nitrogen in the soil, a crucial part of medieval survival agriculture. Nearby, a boy tries to impress a girl by wrestling a sheep. The sheep wins. You laugh so hard your ribs hurt, then go back to planting. Midday brings visitors, not nobles, not tacksmen. These are wanderers, seasonal workers, tinkers. A woman selling dried apples from a cart lined with scraps of lace. She tells stories for a copper coin. Says she once kissed a knight who smelled like boiled leather and had no teeth. You give her 2 coins. Fringe tidbit. Traveling storytellers and minstrels were common in the spring and summer seasons, offering news, entertainment, and even medicines in exchange for food or coin. Their tales often blurred the line between news and myth, shaping village understanding of the outside world. One story sticks with you. She speaks of a city far south where people dig canals and drain swamps, where no one starves in winter, and bread is sweet with spice. You can't tell if it's real. Doesn't matter. You keep the image anyway. That night, the fire burns bright in the village square. Someone roasts chestnuts. Someone else finds a broken lute string and plays anyway. It's out of tune, but so are you, and you're still here. You overhear a drunken mason mumble something about the summer tax. Everyone groans. The joy dulls slightly, but nobody leaves. Not yet. They want the warmth to last. You sit with an elder, Agnes, who's outlived 3 husbands, a landslide, and the pox. She tells you the worst winter she remembers was the year the river froze so hard that fish died trapped beneath the ice. And what did you eat, you ask? Each other's patience, she says, then laughs a hoarse wheeze that shakes her shoulders. You pour her another cup of nettle tea. Historians still argue whether medieval communities developed stronger bonds due to shared seasonal suffering, or whether harsh conditions created internal fractures and rivalries. Some accounts show both. Fights over food one day, communal singing the next. The next morning, the livestock are out in full. Goats scream like demons, cows bellow, and chickens have synchronized their crowing to maximum annoyance. You sip thin barley broth and watch your world breathe again. A neighbor passes by and gives you a turnip, just because. You've never loved a root vegetable more. The roads are clearing and word spreads that the bishop may visit in a few weeks. Not because he cares, but because he's collecting something. Money, penance, chickens, or all 3. People start scrubbing thresholds and mending tunics. You patch your cloak. Not because you care about bishops, but because dignity is a kind of wealth. That afternoon, a traveling merchant stops by. He shows you a strange wooden device, says it's a spinning wheel, claims it can spin wool twice as fast. You blink at it. The village elder squints. Someone pokes it with a stick. He asks for 5 chickens in trade. You laugh. He leaves with 2. You'll never admit he won the bargain. Back in your hut, you hang sprigs of fresh herbs near the door. Not for flavor, for luck. Spring means planting, yes, but also warding off misfortune, illness, envy. The new season comes with new dangers, and you've learned not to trust peace without a side of caution. You sleep with the window open now, just a crack. Just enough to smell the mud and the grass and the still cool breeze that promises nothing, but doesn't threaten either. The rhythm of life has quickened, but not chaotically. More like a dance you've finally memorized. You wake earlier now, not because you must, but because the sunrise is gentler than any rooster. Your limbs still creak, but the ache has softened into something familiar. like a song that always starts in the same key. Outside, the crops are stretching upward with unearned optimism. Barley, oats, cabbage, peas climbing up sticks like they're trying to escape the dirt. You hum a tune while weeding, accidentally matching tempo with the rhythm of a nearby hammer. Someone's fixing a fence. Again. You hear more laughter in the fields these days. Not wild belly laughs, but the kind that lives in the back of the throat, a shared joke, a knowing smile. You've survived something together. No one has to say it aloud. Mainstream historical fact, by early summer, medieval peasants were fully immersed in agricultural duties, sowing, maintaining, and eventually harvesting. Their daily lives revolved around seasonal labor cycles, often dictated by the monastic calendar or local lord's demands. You receive a note. Yes, a note. It's written on old parchment, folded so many times the corners have frayed. No seal, no wax, just twine. You open it to find a message from your cousin in the next village over. Send garlic and gossip. We have mushrooms and scandal. You smile. Later that week, you take a trip, if you can call 2 miles a trip. You cross paths with shepherds, children herding ducks, and a suspicious-looking cat wearing a child's bonnet. No one explains. No one questions it. When you arrive, the cousin greets you like royalty. You trade garlic for mushrooms, bread for pickled beets, and stories for silence followed by gasps. The scandal? A baker ran off with a candle maker. Turns out, wax and flour do mix, socially. Fringe tidbit, inter-village gossip networks were powerful tools of social cohesion in medieval rural society. Though often exaggerated, these stories helped spread information and maintain a sense of wider communal identity across isolated communities. On the way home, you pass through a clearing and find a small shrine built from twigs, bones, and what appears to be a melted spoon. A prayer to something, or someone. You leave behind a sprig of thyme. It feels right. Back in the village, preparations for midsummer begin. The young ones are tasked with collecting flowers. The older ones brew dubious drinks. You, naturally, are roped into costume duty. You sew antlers to a tunic and pretend not to care. That night, the fire blazes tall enough to roast shadows. People dance around it like they're daring the darkness to come back. Some wear masks. Others wear nothing but mud and pride. The village elder starts singing a tune from his youth, off-key but heartfelt. You join in, your voice blending with dozens of others into a symphony of not quite right notes. Someone tries to leap over the fire and fails spectacularly. Laughter erupts. Even the goats seem amused. Historians still argue whether such festivals were true religious observances or merely excuses to let loose between harvests. Some suggest midsummer rites retained pre-Christian roots that allowed peasants to reclaim a sliver of spiritual autonomy in otherwise feudal lives. You think it's both. Sacred chaos, sanctioned mischief. You go to bed with sore feet, a painted face, and a slightly scorched sleeve. The next morning, you wake to the scent of bread. Not burned, not stale, just warm. The kind of smell that lingers in your clothes, that makes the air feel like a blanket. A child delivers a small loaf to your doorstep. Says it's a thank you for your stories by the fire. You didn't know they were listening. The bread is undercooked and filled with too much fennel. It is perfect. You spend the next few days patching clothes, drying herbs, and organizing your chest of things to trade when desperate. It includes 1 button made of bone, a fork carved from antler, and 3 carved wooden spoons with only minor demonic energy. Your neighbor shows up with a sheep. Just a sheep. You name it tax evasion and pretend it understands irony. The days are hot now, but not unbearable. The kind of heat that makes you sleepy, but not sick. a good heat. The kind that makes you believe next winter might not be as cruel. You know better, but still, you believe a little anyway. That evening, the sky turns red in a way that feels personal. The clouds stretch like pulled wool, tinged with orange and purple and the faintest hint of mischief. You lie in the grass, watching birds fight over a discarded crust. You fall asleep there, briefly, the earth still warm from the day's sun. You dream of bread, firelight, and goats wearing bonnets. You wake with grass stuck to your face and a bee hovering over your nose. Everything is exactly as it should be. You wake to the sound of clanging, metal on metal, not war, not invasion, just the blacksmith arguing with his apprentice again. Apparently, the new boy melted the wrong kind of iron. The result? A sword that looks suspiciously like a soup spoon. Your joints grumble as you rise, and you mutter something about being older than the stones in the bread oven. It's not true, but it feels accurate. Summer's peaking. The days are long, the fields are green, and the mosquitoes are staging a coordinated siege on your ankles. You swat at them half-heartedly and trudge outside into the warm haze of mid-morning sun. This is a time when even the busiest villagers find ways to pause, just for a minute. A stolen nap in the shade, a slower pace with the plow, a walk to the well that somehow takes 30 minutes and includes 3 accidental detours past the baker's stall. Mainstream historical fact: during the medieval agricultural cycle, mid to late summer marked the beginning of the grain harvest, one of the most crucial periods of the year. Timing was everything. Too early, and the grain lacked nutrients. Too late, and it risked rot from unexpected rain. This year, the harvest looks promising. That doesn't mean you relax. Oh no. You check the skies like a paranoid goose. One rogue storm could wipe out weeks of labor. And then there's always the rats. Little kings of the granary, feasting like nobles and pooping like demons. You attend the grain blessing ceremony in the village square. The priest arrives wearing sandals, which is either deeply spiritual or deeply lazy. He sprinkles holy water and mutters Latin that you're fairly sure is just a grocery list in disguise. The children chase each other with wheat stalks. The elders mutter about the good old harvests, which, according to them, happened during a time when birds sang in harmony and no one ever sneezed. Later that evening, you sharpen your sickle. Not because it's dull, but because sharpening a sickle is one of those things you do when you're trying not to panic about the future. The metal catches the last golden rays of the sun. You squint, and for a second, it almost looks like a halo. You begin to cut. Not in grand cinematic strokes, just steady, patient movements. Each sweep of the sickle is a heartbeat, a prayer, a question you don't expect an answer to. Sweat beads at your temple. Your back aches. But the sound of the stalks falling, it's soothing, repetitive, like a lullaby whispered in sheafs. You're joined by others. The field becomes a quiet, moving orchestra of labor. No one speaks unless it's necessary. Watch the slope. That bundle's too wet. Don't step on the goose. That last one's recurring. Fringe tidbit. In some rural traditions, the first sheaf of harvested grain was treated like royalty. Decorated, paraded, or kept in a special place to bless the rest of the crop. Some called it the corn dolly. Others believed it housed the spirit of the field. You save your first sheaf and tie it with a ribbon made from last winter's cloak. It's moth-bitten and smells like desperation, but it's yours. You place it on your mantle like a trophy, because it is. Over the next few days, the harvest intensifies. Everyone's hands are blistered. The children fall asleep with straw in their hair. The goats have decided the grain pile is their new throne, and no one dares move them. A storm brews, literally. You see the clouds gathering like angry thoughts on the horizon. You shout, people run. It's like watching ants scramble when the wind shifts. Everyone knows the drill. Cover the piles, secure the tools, and maybe pray to that weird spoon shrine again. The rain hits hard and fast. The air turns to soup. You hide under a tarp with 3 other villagers and one surprisingly calm duck. You all hum different songs to distract yourselves. When the storm passes, you inspect the fields. Damage? Some. Disaster? No. Historians still argue whether such weather events significantly influenced harvest outcomes or whether medieval peasants developed surprisingly robust strategies to cope. Some suggest that village elders had weather-predicting knowledge passed down orally, encoded in songs or proverbs. You believe it. Old Gruntha once predicted hail because her elbow itched in a specific way, and she was right. The sky clears. The rainbow feels like a punchline you don't quite understand, but are grateful for. You continue harvesting. The granaries fill. Slowly, steadily. You feel pride, not the loud, boastful kind, the quiet kind. The kind that settles deep in the bones and makes even porridge taste like a feast. You gather your share. It's not much, but it's enough. Enough to get you through the common cold. Enough to trade for firewood or shoes or questionable wine. That night, there's a feast. Not because everything is perfect, but because enough is enough. The table overflows with bread, butter, and stories that get wilder with each retelling. One man claims he saw a badger steal a ladle and declare itself the new kitchen god. You toast to the absurdity and to survival. Someone plays a lute badly. A child drums with spoons. A dog howls in tune. You sit back, belly full, heart tired, mind quiet. You made it, not to the end, but to this moment. And sometimes that's everything. It's the day after the feast. Your head is throbbing, not from wine, but from too much laughter, too much dancing, and possibly one too many spoon drum solos courtesy of your neighbor's kid. The air feels cooler this morning, sharper. It whispers something you don't want to hear. Autumn is arriving. The leaves on the old elm near the granary are blushing copper at the edges. The sky looks higher somehow, stretched thin over a season that promises both beauty and bitterness. And just like that, the harvest season fades into memory, replaced by the ticking countdown to winter's next attack. You spend the next weeks preparing, not dramatically, just constantly. Every trip to the forest includes a firewood bundle on your back. Every leftover bone becomes broth. Every spare strip of cloth gets tucked into cracks in the cottage walls. You become a hoarder of warmth, a miser of heat. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval peasants prepared for winter through methods we might call micro-prepping. Salting meats, drying fruits, insulating walls with straw, sealing roofs with clay. Food was stored in earthenware, root cellars, or suspended from beams to keep it from rats and rot. You salt everything, even things that probably don't need salting. Your hands smell like brine. You dream of salt. You start to suspect that your personality has become salt-based. But you keep going. The turnips are dug up, the apples are hung. The last of the carrots get hidden in barrels beneath damp cloths and prayer. You kill and pluck 2 chickens, whispering apologies and compliments. You had a great personality. The cottage transforms into a kind of bunker, not militarized, just padded, softened, reinforced with layers of old blankets, forgotten cloaks, and, for some reason, a sheep that insists on sleeping by the hearth. Fringe tidbit. In some medieval villages, animals were deliberately brought indoors during the coldest months, not just for warmth, but because their body heat helped raise the temperature of living spaces by several degrees. Chicken central heating, basically. The days shorten. Your breath starts to fog the air even indoors. You mend everything. Socks with more hole than fabric, a cracked bucket, your patience. You try to keep spirits high, tell stories, whistle tunes, fake enthusiasm about the way your new cabbage storage system totally feels revolutionary. Still, there's a shift in the village. People don't linger as long in the square. Voices become quieter, jokes become darker. If I freeze in my sleep, just toss me in the oven for 5 minutes, I'll be a peasant pastry. You sense it in the sky, in the way the geese fly lower, angling south, in the smell of the first frost, like metal and silence. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants experienced a kind of seasonal depression or whether their deep spiritual rituals helped stave off the gloom. Some point to winter festivals and holy days as culturally engineered ways to maintain morale through the darkest months. You light more candles, not just for light, but for comfort, for hope. You carve little faces into root vegetables and call them protection spirits. You name one of them Mildred. Mildred guards the flower. You pretend she scowls at mice. A nearby villager falls ill, not with plague or pox, just exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that wraps around the bones and tells them it's okay to stop. You visit with soup, awkwardly pat their shoulder, and pretend not to notice how they didn't light a fire that morning. Winter hasn't arrived yet, but its shadow has. You gather your family. You rehearse the rules. No opening the door unless it's necessary. No wasting candles before sundown. No fighting over blankets. You look directly at your uncle when you say this. And finally, everyone survives. That's not a promise, it's a command. An unspoken vow passed down like a recipe. Survive. No matter what. You reinforce the roof. Again. You patch the door with dried moss and a nail that keeps bending sideways no matter how many times you hammer it. You laugh quietly because the nail reminds you of yourself. Bent, stubborn, but still holding things together. There's one final thing to do. Bless the house. Not with priest or ceremony, just a walk through each room. A whispered word here. A knuckle knocked on wood there. You touch the bedpost, the windowsill, the pot you'll cook in. You nod to Mildred. She approves. You open the door one last time to collect frost-kissed kindling. The air slices through you like a forgotten debt. Winter's arrived. And yet, this time, you don't flinch. You've done everything you could. You've prepared, you've stored, you've fortified. Now, all that's left is to endure. The first snow falls that night. It's quiet, gentle, deceptively peaceful. You lie awake, counting flakes like stars through the cracks in the shutters. The fire crackles, the sheep snores, and as sleep curls around your toes, you whisper a quiet prayer. Not for ease, not for luxury, just for enough. You wake before the sun, not because of duty or hunger, but because of the cold whispering across your face like a ghost. The fire's gone out. Again. You fumble for the flint, your fingers too stiff to be useful, and wonder if there's a word for the unique despair of cold socks. Outside, the world is white. Not the fluffy, greeting card kind of white, but a dense, crushing, unforgiving white that makes you feel like time has stopped and decided not to restart until it's done laughing at you. You don't cry. There's no energy for that. Instead, you grunt, mutter something deeply unholy about snowflakes, and shuffle to the firewood. It's damp. Of course it is. Mainstream historical fact, many medieval peasants struggled with wet firewood during winter, especially when poor storage let moisture creep into their bundles. It made fires harder to start, less efficient, and filled homes with choking smoke. Yet fire was survival. without it, food couldn't be cooked, hands couldn't function, and sickness took hold faster. You coax a flame anyway. It sputters, flickers, and eventually takes. You breathe like you just saved a life, because you did. Yours. Breakfast is thin. Just a stew thickened with barley and desperation. But it's hot. It slides down your throat and lights a small fire in your chest. You're grateful for it. You make a mental note to thank past you for storing that bone broth back in October. You're starting to respect her. She had foresight and elbow grease. The days blend. There are no big events, just smaller victories. A mouse caught in the trap, a pair of mittens dried just in time, a pot of beans that didn't burn, a neighbor who waves instead of shuffles. In winter, these are headline news. Fringe tidbit, some medieval peasants believed that whistling inside during winter would invite the wind indoors, specifically a malevolent wind spirit. Whether or not it's true, you stop whistling. Just in case. Each week brings something new. A cough, a leak in the roof, a little panic. But also the thawing of an icicle so long you start giving it a name and backstory. Sir Drip-a-Lot, Night of the Gutter. The village shrinks emotionally during winter. Fewer visits, more silences. People become shadows behind windows and smoke. But every once in a while, someone leaves bread on your doorstep or offers a candle stub. These moments are electric. They remind you that community isn't just summer festivals. It's surviving shoulder to shoulder in freezing silence. Historians still argue whether tight-knit villages developed stronger communal bonds due to shared suffering or if hardship amplified competition. Some records suggest villages grew closer in winter. Others describe thefts, suspicion, and the breakdown of trust during long, hungry months. Your hands crack. You wrap them in rags soaked with tallow and hope. You recite old stories under your breath, tales of warmth, of sun, of a meadow where no one had to dig holes to pee through the snow. Then, one day, a bird chirps. It's small, ridiculously smug, but it chirps. And that one sound slices through your cold thoughts like a hot poker. It means something's changing. You open the shutters a little more. The snow has softened, melted at the corners. The mud is visible. Mud. You haven't been this excited about mud since you were 6 and still believed in forest goblins. Another day passes, then another, then suddenly, green, just a whisper of it. A blade of grass sticking its neck out like it's testing the air for cruelty. You stare at it for 10 full minutes. It's more moving than any sermon you've ever heard. And then you hear the river. It's running again, not with the angry ice-claw churn of winter, but a soft babble, like it's gossiping with the rocks. You walk to its edge and stare until your toes go numb. The world is breathing again. You go home, throw open the shutters, and for the first time in what feels like 100 years, you smile at the wind. It still bites, but now it feels more like a farewell nibble than a death threat. You survived, not because you were lucky, not because you were blessed, but because you were stubborn, clever, and, let's be honest, too spiteful to die in a snowbank surrounded by salted turnips. You think of everyone who didn't make it. And then, without meaning to, you think of next winter, because winter always comes again. But next time, you'll be better. You'll store more, prepare more, complain less. Well, a little less. You sit at your table, scratch a few words into a scrap of bark for future you. Something like, don't eat all the good cheese in November. And then you exhale. For the first time in months, your breath doesn't fog the air. The fire is still crackling. You're safe now, tucked beneath layers of wool, memory, and just a hint of soot. Outside, the frost is giving way to dew. The trees, still bare, are stretching their limbs like they've been dreaming too long. You let your eyes close, your breath slows, your fingers uncurl. The ache in your knees softens into a hum, and the hum melts into stillness. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you hear the river again, babbling, inviting, alive. You remember the crunch of snow beneath your boots, the scent of stew, the flicker of candlelight over the face of someone you love. It was never about conquering the cold. It was about outlasting it. And you did. Whatever storms tomorrow brings, be it ice or fire or foolish lords with new taxes, you'll meet them, just like you always have, because you're still here, still breathing, still warm. Sleep well, traveler. The fire will keep watch tonight. Sweet dreams.